Hello, Craig Lane with Health Alchemy YouTube channel. We are now on November, oh my God, it's Friday the 13th, that's right. Yeah. Woo! The 13th pernicious influence, which is our topic tonight, the 6 pernicious influences. And wow, Friday the 13th. I guess 13's not so bad after all. We have another nice group here for a community dinner. A maskless society, looks like here, thank God. And yeah, the topic tonight should be a lot of fun. It took me about 10 or 15 minutes to get in the zone last time, but then I felt it. And then there's really no Craig when I get in the zone. There's just a channel of some sort, and it's just pure fun. So let's hope he comes back again tonight. Pray for, I'll call him Switchboard Craig. The switchboard operator Craig, not the little me down here. And we're going to somehow tie together the 6 pernicious influences, mucus, consciousness, the fall eating and how that goes with sensory gates and how we gate our reality. Oh, and how food and herbs and yogic practices and music practices and meditation practices affect consciousness. We're all science realm, you know. So we'll start it off with, I gotta speak some respect to Stephen Herod Buhner. You title your book Plant Intelligence in the Imaginal Realm. I mean, you're putting it out there. I mean, wow. His book prior to this is called The Lost Language of Plants. WTF? Plants have a language? Yeah, I was just telling somebody earlier that a plant spoke to me first. I was 25 years old. First time I took mushrooms, we decided to do it at minus tide, start at Capitola, and walk along the coast as far as we can on mushrooms to natural bridges, all night long on full moon. Wow. So we got to Pleasure Point from Capitola, it's me and Molnar and my brother. And Will will appreciate this because Will knows the whole setup. And so it's really sweet, you know, all the intricacies of walking at minus tide at full moon along the coast, you know, it's like, wow. So I walked up to this bush, and it's probably like, you know, it's like 10 feet tall, and I'm really curious for some reason, like, you know, like it's like my friend. I'm like, oh, I'm walking over to it. And then I get about this far away from it, and it jumped into me. It jumped into me, and I knew what it was like to be that shrub for about a microsecond. Because then my mind came in and goes, oh, what's all this? And the analysis started, and then it ended. And a lot of experience like that in my life. And I was like, I was just left with like, what the hell just happened to me? And then it turns out years later, I started calling myself a plant whisperer, because plants talk through me. Not in the way you think, but, you know. So that's part of what this guy is speaking to, is this language. Plants, they live in slow motion. You know, we have a fast reality. If you actually look at plants growing, they have volition. You see, like time lapse, they have volition. There's a movie it was on Netflix called What Plants Talk About. I thought it was cute. And it shows they did a tomato hormone where the tomato goes and reaches, you know, for the vine, so because it's a climber. And it showed they would put this stick with this tomato hormone on it, and wherever the stick was, you'd see this thing growing, and it's kind of moving in real time like this on the time lapse, and it always lands in the right spot. You know, it's like, you know, as a scientist, like, okay, 15 tries, 15 nailed it, you know, and wherever they put this little stick, it's really fascinating. So, you know, they're going like this. People that are mystics, they don't have to go like this, because they're going, oh, gee, it's like the plant has a brain, but there really isn't a brain. You know, they're going like, you know, it's like, so how has that thing gotten a volition? And what they don't realize is that consciousness is non-local. I mean, when you have a neurosurgeon who died a few years ago on the operating table from encephalitis, this is not a believer, folks. These are my favorite people. He is not woo-woo by any degree. And this guy died when he was on the operating table. And his quote was, I left my body, floated up above it, and watched what everybody was doing around me. So when he came back, he was clinically dead, flatline, dead for like 90 seconds, dead. But he was still having consciousness. It's not attached to a body. See, the interface got busted. And so he proved it when they all came back, and he said, you were over there saying this, you were standing over there doing this, and he nailed it. Every single person was doing around him. That's the science part. He was dead, but he knew where everybody was. That's pretty freaking cool. It's happened to me a number of times. Out of my body, looking down on it going, One time I slammed my head and just popped right out of my body. I'm looking down on it going, I had so much compassion for it. I was like, oh, It's all broken down there. Maybe I should go back. And then I rushed back in. Oh, my head. Why did I do that? I should have stayed up there. No, a voice actually came in. It scared me. It said, you don't have to go back. And I was like, what are you? I don't trust that voice. So I rushed back in my body. These are the stories of the mystic freak show, you know, like, what? So back to the topic at hand, some of the exciting stories. And so this time of year, if you have a few takeaways that people have been here a few times now really get it, is when mucus appears on your tongue, like stick your tongue, everybody, and everybody look at each other's tongue and see if there's a white or a yellow or a heavy coat on it. That's mucus. So I'm right in the middle in the back. So if it's yellow or darker, that's damp heat in Chinese medicine. And if it's white or clear, that's damp cold. And you use remedies accordingly. But the thing is, if you see mucus there, then there's mucus up here. And the word for that we all use regularly but don't ever think about it is the word ease becomes disease. Lack of ease in your own being is a sign, the first sign of imbalance. And that's what they call vata derangement in Ayurveda. And they call it wind in Chinese medicine. I use wind a lot more loosely than my teachers did. Maybe you can understand, you know, it's like, you know, some of these people are so like orthodox, you know, you shouldn't do shiatsu with oil and polarity therapy. This one dude, he didn't like what I was doing at all. He was like, he wanted me to do the pure barefoot shiatsu, you get your clothes on, and I got naked people on there, and he's just appalled at me. Oh, this is no longer shiatsu. Really funny. So the remedy for mucus, then, the takeaway is radish. There was no other remedy that works as well as radish in the common plant kingdom. None. So I got clients that are like, oh man, but I hate radishes, Craig. And it's like, well, we find a way to make them delicious. So tonight we have cucumber, apples, olives, radishes, daikon radish that Jean got for free because the delivery people?
They thought it was a parsnip.
Yeah, they thought the daikon was a parsnip, which I don't know how you could do that, but one's white and one's yellow, you know. Must have been a pretty albino parsnip. I guess there are albino parsnips after all. There's other vegetables that do work well, and I used to, my metaphor was when I was starting my path 30 plus years ago was, if it says a scrubby action, it's gonna scrub the mucus off. And generally that's true too. So like kale is pretty good, right? Like I lived on handfuls of kale a day for 10 or 15 years, every day, cooked, raw, which is another conversation. So you could make the argument like, well, I want some raw vegetables, and then kale raw is, there's this sulfur compound in it. And there are thiol, glutathione. So the trick there is that the Ayurvedics often talk about, this is where I love crossing traditions, is the high sulfur vegetables, you need to cook them to cook the sulfur out so it doesn't cause vata derangement or wind. And so I would see that, and wind is gas, you know, like, or, you know, either end. It's obviously wind, right? But gas is dysfunction. So if there's gas down here, there's gas up here. Again, so I'm trying to get back to the radish with the, so there's this scrubbing action with these other vegetables, I guess. And you could do the cook like I did with the broccoli or the cabbage or the kale or the Brussels sprouts, or you could try to do it raw. And if you get a lot of gas, then it's a sign you probably shouldn't do it. And then if you cook broccoli or cabbage, you got to take the lid off every now and then because you get that sulfur to steam off. It's very volatile, so it steams right off. That's that smell, you know, ferric sulfide, that awful rotten egg smell. Yeah, that's iron and sulfur. Yum. The iron and sulfur sandwich. Yeah. Which is, there'll be a topic next year I'm going to go into, which I'll get really excited about now. That part of this is that, speaking of iron and oxygen, they're very toxic elements, very, very difficult to manage. And so we have an enzyme in our red blood cell called the ferroxidase enzyme, and it manages these two elements because the fastest cause of aging is the oxidation of the body, the misuse of oxygen. And the conspiracy around iron, you know, the medical iron just kills your liver. And iron is generally recycled by our body much more efficiently than we give it credit for. And so we don't need to take as much as we think. And we need it in the right form, because ultimately low energy is poor extraction of oxygen onto the red blood cell. And 5G also damages that, impairs that process. Turns out it makes the electron, the oxygen molecule, unstable. So it's not a stable orbit. So the body can't quite, it's like a fisherman trying to get a struggling fish versus a fish that's swimming straight in the water, kind of metaphor. That's just what I'm reading right now. And so there's a lot of influences to take consciousness out of the present moment. My purpose of sitting here is to help each of us be a little more awake in the world, because as I saw when I was younger, especially men who are asleep at the wheel cause a lot of damage in the world. And I actually disowned my masculine side for a long time without even knowing it, because I was so disgusted with what men had done with the world. Because the patriarchy has been running the world for the most part. And then I realized that was the wrong way to go. And now I'm back, I'm in the give back phase, which is we need to sit together and, you know, disagree and be okay with that, you know, some degree, as men especially, without fighting and without name calling and all that. It's childish. And I was there 5 or 10 years ago. I was called a man child 8 years ago by a woman. And I was 47 years old. You're a man child. Ooh, wow, I got some more work to do apparently. 27 years wasn't enough. A few more. My teacher likes to say, you don't get to decide when you're done with your work. The divine does. And so correct. So just think of radish, and if you have a universal mucus remedy, if you have a solvent, which is an acid, which could be lemon juice, could be sour fruit, could be apple cider vinegar, and you put that with the radish, then you have the acid solvent with the decongestant solvent of the radish, and you have this, and that's what's in that salad. Olive is generally, I have this whole thing of studying of Epstein-Barr syndrome, and you see how many digressions I can go off on Epstein-Barr syndrome and how it relates to fungus and herpes and parasites, and they're all somehow intertwined with this whole idea that microbes can shapeshift, biopleomorphism. And Monica's partner, Carl, have all kinds of interesting conversations about this stuff. And what we're trying to do is provide a poor terrain for those things to grow inside of us. Because a lot of debate that I've seen over the years is that the microbial thing is, yeah, I mean, if you live next to a cesspool, then you're going to have a germ problem. But generally, our terrain determines our microbial balance in and around our body. And so does our chi. We have a sort of electromagnetic field around our body. The Chinese have a name for it. You know, do you know the name of our sort of the outer shield of chi around our body? I know they have a name for it. I just forget the stuff, you know. Yeah, it's unfortunate, but oh well. So there is. They call it that, and I feel it like when mine goes down, my inguinal hernia on the left side will bulge out. And it can also bulge out from improper eating. So for me, I never got surgery 20 years ago because for me, it was my indicator when I was out of balance. If I ate the wrong foods, I get gas and it would blow up like a balloon. Never hurt. So I was like, look at that thing, push it back up in there and then, you know, overdo it. And then, oh, bulging all day today. What have I been doing? Oh, I haven't slept well on 3 nights. Maybe I should go in my inversion table. And each of us has these signs. That's why I'm up here. And our early warning signals before actual illness sets in. And I was fortunate to survive my trials and tribulations, to be here to tell you all. As one of my teachers says, there's no guarantee that you're going to make it through your awakening. You know, there's no guarantee you're going to survive. And a lot of my friends die over the years. So you'll hear me keep coming back to sort of like mucus and radishes, because they're a good thing to just keep reminding ourselves of, is that most of our problems we cause ourselves. I even had a teacher, an old Japanese master that a bunch of us were fascinated with, and he would say there are no accidents in life either. So we call accidents, there's minor disturbances in the chi's imbalance around you and the universe. And it's just the life sort of realigning the imbalance. And that's pretty meta view, right? It's like, I call it the great chess player in the sky. When Will and Trevor showed up, I've known Will a long time, 40 years now, I think, 35. And they live right down the street from each other. They don't know each other. So they live within a minute walk of each other, and they showed up within a minute of each other tonight. Chess player in the sky. You gotten off work though. If you would have been home, it would have been even better. But you still work over off 26, right? Yeah, so you're close anyway. So that's what I call the great chess player in the sky. And okay, I got to digress on this one because it just popped in. The latest pop-in just said, speaking of great chess player in the sky, I had a friend that when we opened our restaurant in 1996, there was a group of us in my nutrition program at Cal Poly that we just weren't buying the whole Western model of nutrition. And so there were a bunch of holes in it. And so we were the group of 5 bad boys in the back, you know, just giving the teachers the hard questions they couldn't answer, especially the B12 questions. And so one teacher just threw his arms up. No, that he couldn't say, I don't know. What's the hell? You know, I don't know a lot of things, you know. And so we went and got this restaurant open. And this guy, there were 2 brothers and me. And one of the brothers, I was living in his home, and we had a little, like a male commune. And he said, you know when somebody pops in your head? Yeah, you know, it pops in my head all day. I call it my internal airtime. Will pops in, James might pop in, and Megan, surfing, something about sex, you know, they come in about every 20 thoughts, you know. The male animals generally around, you know, it's entertaining if you don't take it seriously. And he says, you know, somebody pops in your head. I go, yeah. He goes, you know, you validate that? He goes, just pick up the phone and call him right then. So for about 6 months, that was my project. Every time somebody popped in, I'd pick up the phone and call them. And 9 times out of 10, the person would say, I was just thinking about you. I was fascinated with that. The non-locality of consciousness. I call it now a co-arising. It's a co-arising between the 2 of us. That's a new Craigism, a co-arising. Co-arising. Make sure you give Craig full credit. This is an ego-filled universe.
That requires quotation marks.
I need my stimulant to calm down. Where's my Adderall? Oh my God. Thank you, James. Where do I go with that? So that comes from a clear consciousness to me. That's why I eat and live the way I do, is I want to have that kind of clarity. I don't want to be in the La Brea tar pits of the fog banks of what I used to live in. It's like so not satisfying anymore. And I mean, I'm still, you know, there's a great thing to ponder for a second. I mean, take a breath and then imagine the feeling of what's looking out through your eyes right now. And feel that force looking out through your eyes right now. And then ask yourself, could this be the same force that's looking out through my eyes now that was also looking out through my eyes when I was born? And if you can just grok a millionth of that, it's like fucking dynamite. Because that's the greatest report I can give you, is it is the same. It never changed. It's always and already present. And when people say they discover enlightenment, and that's the simplicity of it, is the present moment is it. In all of its complexity and simplicity, you know, it's just so simple that our mind just goes away from it. Oh, that's just too simple. When I broke my neck 34 years ago, the first thing I did was like a yoga class because I knew Western therapies were pointless. And I was at Dominican, you know how that goes. It's like, yeah, they're alive, for God's sakes. I mean, in a 24-hour period, they had me in 2 different braces and different x-rays and, you know, the big, what is that one big machine they put you in? It's like a donut. Is that the MRI? Yeah, they put me in that thing, you know, and just, I got a broken neck and a concussion, for God's sakes, and these whirling lights around me, and, you know, talk about an acid trip. And I made it out of there alive. But I'm just going to bring it back to just the clarity of eating well gets one there to where the connection between oneself and the present moment is cleaner for me. And I was told that after I broke my neck at 21 was I need to align with purity, whatever that meant. It just kept getting stronger and stronger. And if I didn't follow the yellow brick road of purity, which slowly shrank, where it took me 8 years to get off of wheat, for example. I knew I needed to get off of wheat, but I love the sourdough bread and the hemp plus granola crunch and the homemade Toll House cookies. And I mean, the list could go on and on. Well, the yummy baked products that I was a baker back in the day. Are you kidding me? So the good news is you can do a 24-hour sourdough and make healthy bread again like our ancestors did, because in a lot of European cultures, the word bread meant meal. And when you ferment wheat, a 24-hour fermentation of wheat, which was proven scientifically, they took a big ball of wheat, measured the gluten content of it, did a 24-hour sourdough process. And after that 24 hours and baking the bread, there was no gluten left in the final baked bread. But it has to be a 24-hour alchemical process of an entire day. Just like miso. I study the hell out of miso, because what is this beneficial fungus? That's what miso is. It's an aspergillus fungus. Aspergillus oryzae. And there's a whole book on it called the Book of Miso, and they break it down, like what it's actually doing, and like, wow, there's a whole world that we don't even talk about or think about. That's why I love being up here, is the look on your faces of like, what did he just say? Because I had teachers like that, it's just the audacity, But the center point is what, as far as I can see, with every yogic tradition, every musical tradition, every sports tradition, is about getting back to the happy place in the present moment. Anybody who's surfed, Will can attest to this. If you're out there thinking in the water and a 20-foot wave is coming and you're on that wave, are you thinking about what's going on next? No, you're quite dead. But see, surfing demands that to a certain degree. All these survival sports, they demand that intense focus, and that's why we get addicted to it, because if you don't do it, well, the consequence is pretty severe. And that's an incredible edge to walk. Yeah, some of you have your own edges you walk. So to slow down this thing enough to let reality break through, because if something's always and already present, for God's sakes, how are we unenlightening ourselves away from it? When Jesus said you're already forgiven, and people know that line, he's pointing at the same thing. The forgiveness you seek is always and already present. That's how you get to the point of letting go of something, is you align with what already let go. So as a part of you, the minute it happened, it had already let go. The most perfect part of you, of all of us. If you can just align with that, then that makes letting go a lot easier. Usually requires some forgiveness first, generally, to align with that force. Some humility. That's why I'm still here, I'm about as humble as, a king, I guess. Some work to do there. I'm pretty hot. But we all have to do that. And so that's why I live and eat the way I do, because if I don't do that way, I'm dangerous. I'm a dangerous being when I'm asleep at the wheel, because I know what part of me is capable of. It's pretty severe. I don't want that guy walking around the planet. I want him inside here with a big hug around him, Not a noose, not a cage, but hey, I love you, man. You got to function. And that's what doing this does. So a couple more practical points is we're heading into a contractive season. It's repetition for some of you, but if you feel it, like, okay, let me go into our contractive food. If you get a little fork or something, this is salt cured lemon. So if anybody wants to pass this around, experience what contraction on your tongue feels like, this is the most contractive substance I've got. It's sour, salty, bitter, a little bit of spice because of the peel. It was actually the Chinese medical people that got me so much into orange peels and lemon peels. It's like, wow, there's so many formulas with those in there, for their carminative action and digestive action, and they just go to waste in our culture. And they're just really, really good medicine. Even if you just chop them up and put them with apple cider vinegar, then you've got a good aperitif. And you have mucus, for example. Think of this stuff. We Americans just throw stuff away. They don't need the eggshells. Well, what if you put eggshells in the apple cider vinegar? You get a nice calcium supplement. It kind of costs you $0. So I'm going to bring it back to, if you don't follow what the natural law is doing, so this time of year it's doing that. And how do we know it's doing that in nature? Anybody want to mention what the trees are doing?
Going down the roots.
Letting go of the leaves.
But are the trees trying to let go of the leaves?
No,
They're just falling off, right? That's what I like about the distinction between humans and nature and the reality. Is humans, you get you this, well, I'll try. I'm really trying to let go. It's like a bird doesn't try and fly, for God's sakes, it just flies. The water doesn't try and run, it just runs. And so as a therapist, a nutritional health therapist, when I hear someone say try or maybe, it's a no to me. Because they're still efforting to get to where what's always and already present already made that decision. half my clients know for a year they need to see me. And I ask them, why don't you come? He's like, I wasn't ready to make the changes I knew you were going to ask of me. I'm not joking. Thank you. I am not joking. And so, I mean, I won't put myself on this level, but this is what they say happens in India when you got the, like the guru and the master is the people throw their power onto that person. And then the person temporarily stewards that energy. They steward that energy. And this is a perfect metaphor when Monica works through. And the person stewarding that energy, and then eventually, it's going to go, the camera's over here. So then they give it back. But there never really was a giving over or a giving back. It's all an illusion. It just appears that way. And as a person who's I get into a lot of overwhelm because I just generally, I want to try and help what's going on this planet. And then we all get that overwhelmed place. And so that's the place where we generally fall asleep, right? We're overwhelmed, tired, crabby. Well, the crabby is the asleep part. And so by eating better, I mean, you guys wouldn't have recognized who I was as a child because I was painfully shy and wounded and traumatized and eating, let's see, Jolly Ranchers, peanut butter cups, 2 or 3 Cokes a day, French fries, pizza, French toast, Wonder Bread for sure. I don't think I even really ate a vegetable until I broke my neck at 21. I mean, I might have had a salad or some broccoli here or there, but my poor mom tried, She tried to go from Count Chocula to Cheerios, which she thought was a healthier option, which probably at the time was, but me and my brother, we were little monsters, just, terrible. We manipulate her like, like a lawyer would manipulate people, So we always got our way, and so we never had to eat really that great. Because Dad was sort of absent father, we like to say in the men's work, but that's neither here nor there. So Gina giving me the half-hour signal, which means a couple of little teasers. What are the 6 pernicious influences? Briefly went through this in more depth last week, but wind is one, and there's both internal and external wind. And when it's windy inside, we all kind of know what that feels like, right? The storm in the mind. Even one of the old endocrinologists that was alive, Henry Harrower, and some of his predecessors from 1890 through, there were some great men in the late 1800s, early 1900s, great health professionals. Henry Harrower was the first endocrinologist. And he used to call it a thyroid storm or a pituitary storm. You get a storm in the organ. I thought it was fascinating because he's pointing at hot flash. That's a thyroid storm. Some people, when you get the hot flash, or an adrenal storm. And if you start learning to feel the processes of life, because what chemistry is showing us is a snapshot of a process occurring in time. Your lab work, for example, isn't reality. It's a representation of a certain parameter at a moment in time. That's all your lab work is. You're living from point A to point B. That lab work is at point A 50 out of 100 steps, maybe, conceptually. But you see what I'm saying? And we've somehow been manipulated, I believe, to put our attention, our assemblage point or our perception point, our attention, if you will. Energy goes where attention goes. So we put our attention in divided places and we end up divided. Our body is a perfect Xerox machine for what we're thinking. If we think divided thoughts, our body gives us divided emotions. If we listen to divided music, we're going to have divided emotions. If we're around divided people, we're going to have divided, because it's more permeable than we thought. And this is, we talk about boundaries. That's a metaphor for a lot of what's going on. And so when we don't eat well, then literally our field of perception starts to narrow. Anybody can relate to that? And you're sick in bed with the flu. Your world's about this big. To go out and ride a wave in the blue sky, it's like, I'm as big as a freaking universe. I was watching one of these guys on YouTube just getting barreled, with the camera, holding the camera, and it's like that. What that feels like is undescribable. Like, try and describe it, Will. Like, time slows down. Yeah. And I love that time slows down zone, but we're not, a lot of that's grace. I mean, the grace of getting ourselves in a position to be on that wave requires a lot more work than people realize. I mean, especially with the crowds around here. I mean, he knows. It's like a magician act trying to get waves. And so we have a good variety of foods here tonight. And so in a normal world with normal joy and recreational eating, that you have a little bit of the acid forming, mucus forming, and you have a little bit of the dissolving. Because what happens when you have too many of the dissolving foods? Anybody ever done deep cleansing? What generally happens? Deep cleansing. Loose bowels for one, right?
It's out the body, yeah.
So here's a question to ask. Did anybody try the salt cure lemon, the sense of
Yes.
contraction? Okay, now we have the opposite. We'll pass around open up one of these cayenne pepper capsules and take a little tiny sprig of cayenne pepper on your tongue.
Don't snort it.
You can snort it if you want.
Yes. No.
The cayenne or the salt?
Yeah, so this question about the cayenne was on these figs here. And so a lot of what a good chef will do, or see, a chef for a meal is like a formulator. And ideally your doctor is a good formulator. And ideally your acupuncturist can formulate the right set of points. And Trevor Rolfer, he has a formulation for how to realign someone who's out of alignment, right? And ideally there's sort of a plan there. And so when you make a meal like this, what I love more than anything is just the thy will be done aspect of like, it always seems to work out perfect every week. There's always the right amount of veggies and the right amount of heavier stuff. And I love how that works out. So in a normal universe, when you don't go out of balance, you don't have the mucus, and that's a sign that you're not windy inside. So the other ones we'll kind of go over a little bit more later, but if you leave, especially as a listener in the audience, that wind can be felt, and heat can be felt, and cold can be felt, and dry can be felt, and damp can be felt. And these are the pernicious influences. And there's internal states of consciousness that correspond to that. There's hot thoughts, cold thoughts. There's damp thoughts, dry thoughts. They're all states of being. And so we're passing on this cayenne pepper, and that's the action of cayenne pepper is out like this, like an explosion, right? It feels like that. The action of sour is the opposite. It's, because I had a buddy who had too much sour and too much yerba mate, which is a diuretic, and he was a 25-year-old with hands of an 80-year-old. He just shriveled up into this shrinkled prune raisin thing. I was like, from too much yerba mate and too many sour foods. He was a sauerkraut guy. And no one could figure out why his hands look so old so fast. And I said, well, apply the actions of life here, bro. Mate is incredibly contractive, and you do too much of it. Any of the teas are. You have tannic acid, you shrink up. And you're doing this sauerkraut, sour on with it, with the action is this. If you know the actions of life, it's like, dude, you need some gentle sweet and some mild spices to open it back up. Cayenne pepper, ginger's a better long-term spice, by the way. One of my teachers calls cayenne sort of a false surface level fire. And then ginger's like a deeper fire, garlic too. So I'm going to end, transition out now, but next week, everybody excited about, I love the idea of Thanksgiving and giving thanks for grace and consciousness, but I was talking to a few people earlier about, the Stephen Herod Buhner book, and we're going to go into the sensory gates, but I've kind of overstayed my my length of how much I wanted to say tonight. But these sensory gates are how we perceive reality, and I was talking, these conversations about cannabis, and I told you about the mushroom experience, and Buhner he writes about this, that it's kind of well known that we have these sensory gates that manage how we assemble reality. Like we're all perceiving reality in different ways, right? Carlos Castaneda's teacher, Don Juan Mas, called it the assemblage point. I call it the perception point, the place from which we perceive reality. And that's why people are drawn to these DMT substances, because it shifts the place they're perceiving reality from. And these sensory gates, which are around the thalamus, they gate our reality. And people say, I get paranoid when I smoke cannabis. And that happened to me I grew up in this town, so people smoking weed around me, I'd try it. And racing heart, paranoia. And I'm like, so I started to ask myself, how come they're having a good time laughing over there? And I'm all screwed up over here with the same substance. Like, I got some work to do, I think. So I did. I went and did some work for about 2 or 3 years. And then I started enjoying cannabis because I realized something about this on some primal level, that this is ungating my reality. I'm seeing and feeling things I'm not comfortable with because I'm being opened up to things that are there, but I'm not perceiving them before, and now I am. And the beings on the other side of that gate are not perceiving me. And there's some, let's just say, some tricksters on the other side. But I've had a little punching bag experiences with a few of them before on the other side. So to one of my buddies, he got messed with UFO sightings when he was taking essence of gold. And I told him, I go, dude, you're playing around with magic realms with this essence of, this, well, I don't know what they called it. But he was ungating his reality is what, in the action, he's ungating himself. And that's why in the shamanic training, that's what they're doing. They're ungating, and you have years of preparation for that. Because my perception of it is, if Craig Lane is represented by a jigsaw puzzle, when I've had 20, 30, 40, 50 of these experiences, Craig Lane goes like this. Shattered into a million pieces. And anybody know Juan Acosta-Curdy, the guy Juan who died, Dr. Juan? He was so fascinated with this stuff. He got me and my partner Noel and his partner Cheryl McEwen at the time to do the whole, we put on the whole headset and smoked the mimosa and did the DMT experience. And so he documented all of it. It's like there's a high theta wave experience, and then it drops off. And he's like, well, that state you're in right there. I was really doing this over here. And I was just going, wow, this guy's tracking all this stuff, on a sine wave kind of graph. And that's why we have training for things like this, is because a lot of people, they recreationally go into LSD, they go into mushrooms, and then they get blown open. And they're in a world that they have no business being in some cases. And they go nuts. I had a friend at UCLA, and I was living down there when I was 22, 23 with my best friend. And this other guy, his best friend, had done acid too many times, too much, too long. And he said to us, quote, something in me snapped that last time. He's never the same. And to me, that's more of a lack of respect and honor for the beings on the other side who did some work to get there, maybe in some cases. And it's a karmic thing, I think. If we don't give thanks, like as a meat eater, I mean, I had better have an attitude of gratitude, because there's a being that died because I wanted any to eat. And, the natives knew that, and the Dalai Lama knows that, and all the meat eaters, but we've lost that connection to some degree of just thank you. And I love that Thanksgiving's coming up. Thanksgiving in the most contracted time of year. Things contracting, is not all light, and if you're back east, it's snowing and really contracted. And so next week we're going to spend some time going through this and continuing this theme of like how foods affects this, and how yoga, meditation, music, touch, massage, even sex, there's ways to affect how we perceive reality that are within our grasp quite easily. But we've sort of been trained over here when, like in my world, it's like, oh, wow, that's what I saw when I started studying Taoist thought. What I call the Chinese Indians was, I realized like they do their language in little pictograms. We do our language like this. I'm like, this is a whole different way of perceiving reality that I'm not aware of. So I'd better start teabagging myself in their reality, to have the experience of their reality. And that's what happened to me over the course of, it took about 13 years. Just 13 years of constant study. And this one teacher, when I was 8 years into it, said, oh, it's going to be about 10 or 15, maybe 20 years before you just get it suddenly. I don't know if you ever got it, John T. There was this point many years into my practice where I was like, oh, it dropped in, like grokked it. You know what I mean? Like instant recall now. Where it was like, let me get the book out and which page number and reference this. And then it was a point where this guy told me what happened, because I was so frustrated. It was like 8 years, like I'm tired of looking at these yin yang diagrams and stomach 36 and, but it came, and it comes for all of us, this way of living. I have followed seasonal, see the colors in here too, is there's a color for the spring and a color for the summer and a color for the fall and a color for the winter. You can wear those colors and feel those frequencies and eat the foods that are relevant to that time and honor the organs that are dominant in the circadian rhythm of life. And And then you're living with what I call natural law, not living outside of natural law. And that's why I know there's a conspiracy on the planet, is because the people running the planet want us not living in alignment with natural law. It should be fairly obvious to anyone who's looking right now. And that's sort of the big secret of why I sit here. This is my life mission, unfolding right before you. This is my Dharma, only I can live it. So here we are. Great. So next week, we will be here same time, same bat channel. That's a nice bubble out. Any official questions anybody wants to, or comments before we turn off the recording? If you want to be on an official capacity. I mean, I went over a lot. It wasn't even really coherent, really, in a lot of ways tonight.
I was curious about mucus. You never really specifically said, but you implied, I guess, that it's bad.
Oh, well, see, that was the talk we had how many weeks ago?
Oh, okay.
We talked about good and bad mucus, and there's a video for it,
So
though.
this is like this is a kind of part of this. Okay.
Yeah, we've been on the same sort of tangent. It started actually with Monica. We developed this theme of community is better for immunity, rather than being isolated. Community is better. So that sort of launched off. Ever since COVID started, I made an effort to get on Facebook and be out there in public talking about immunity and how it really works. Because if you're educated, then there's power, and then you're not subject to the propaganda machine, which is really strong. People's emotions are being played with, and JP Sears did a great little video about the election. I thought he nailed it. He was just, they're playing with people's emotions, and not in a good way. It's like a guitar string. Oh, let's twang over here, and so what we're trying to do here, though, is like, does he feel a sense of ease? You check in how you feel now versus when you walked in the door. So mucus is sort of like a sign that we're disrupted internally. And there's a natural layer of mucus. Like, have you ever seen a kombucha mushroom or kombucha SCOBY? Or slimy, slippery, like a bat ray kind of, or a dolphin skin. And there's a layer of slime that covers our whole body all the way down in the intestines. And there are some people that say, because I've been so long studying it, that the whole thing signals itself. It's one organism on some level. And so if something happens at the top, the guys at the bottom know what's going on. And I had a PhD in this because I used to overeat. So it'd be a point where I knew I needed to stop, and I'd stop. And then the sweet cravings would come when I had my really bad candida yeast problem. And then I would start to eat this stuff, and I had this horrible feeling of like something just rumbled down below. Something went, like I was getting really happy. It was about to be fed, like this monster. I was like, and then it did come out. I had a space egg alien that came out of me in my parasite work. I have a picture of it. It's like, because it was the center of the octopus. People have these candida tentacles that come out. It's well documented. I'm an expert in this stuff. I mean, it's just, it's absolutely disgusting and fascinating at the same time. I mean, I've said it many times. I've had every shape, size, color of everything come out of me. Zebra stripes, polka dots, black tar, little squiggly wigglies, space egg aliens. I mean, I could just go on and on. Wow. But that's what the ecology internally, see, I was not breastfed. And the first thing in my body was sugar soy formula, like the Ensure version for children. What do you think likes that? Pathogenic organisms like that stuff, because it's lifeless, generates rot. So good mucus doesn't encourage rot. But if you keep putting too much down there, then the bugs down there get drunk and they start to die. And then other bugs feed on them that aren't so nice. And everything's eating and shitting. Sorry, FCC regulations. Everything's eating and pooping. And we want good bug poop in us. We want, like, good bug poop is B12, vitamin K, immune factors. Like, bug poop is amazing. Like,
Bacteria are not the enemy.
they're not the enemy.
No, bacteria are great.
Yeah, there are viruses. Viruses are, I can show you guys what I think is a virus. I get these insights. Like, I want to get more insights into viruses. So I've been doing these apple cider vinegar tinctures. And no matter how much I strain it, there's still little strands of the SCOBY in there. And I get these fine strainers. And what they do, they'll have a glass like this, and it looks kind of cloudy, right? It's happened to me like 3 or 4 times now. I just can't help it. I'm getting a download of something. And so I put this one, it was so gross. It had all these little stringy SCOBY stuff in the bottom of my, my apple cider vinegar water. It was like my max mental alert. And it was like, well, they were all diffused before, and now they're all together. I started going, there's a central guiding force here, bringing these things all together. They're all coming back. I shook it up again, and they came back together again. Different form, but they did come back together again. So I strained them out through a tighter mesh strainer. What I thought I had a clear liquid, right? Oh, no, no, no. 3 hours later, there was a tiny, even smaller one, but it was still one in there. I'm going, these are waste fragments. And this ties in with the exosome theory. So here's how you can think of viruses, if you really want to simplify it. I mean, the guy who wrote We Want to Live, Ogenius, the primal diet guy, he called them ghosts, which I thought was an apt metaphor. Viruses are like ghosts. But I'll take it one step further. So your cells eat and poop, right? So if your cells are toxic, what happens to you when you're toxic? Do you smell better or worse?
Worse.
Worse.
Those are exosomes. That's the viral version of that are exosomes. And this, EXOSOMES, exosomes. And people that study virology just naturally know this stuff. That's why the whole COVID thing is just ridiculous to them. And anybody who knows anything about anything is kind of like just going, well, I don't know, it doesn't sound quite right. So your cells have to shit, and that's what your lymphatic system is for. It's for getting that crap, the waste out of the cells, out to the filters, and then eventually processed and out of the body. And the best marker lab work I found for that is bilirubin. For your lymphatic system, bilirubin generally is very low, but there's a big tolerance range, but there's an optimal range. And I see people's bilirubin rising, I look at their eye and I go, what's the lymphatic area in the eye look like? And oh, see, you got the squiggle in the spleen zone. It usually matches up. That's why I love my practice. Don't have to go to these spenty, but let me just see over here. What's your pulse? And oh yeah, I got 3 in a row here. When you get a factor of 3 pointing at a phenomenon on the body, then that's what one of my Oriental medical teachers told me. You look for at least 3 things pointing in that direction, and that's how you make an assessment at that point. That's what I do. I'm fishing, fish around. What's going on over here? And fish aren't biting over there. That's what you do a good interview for intake. So the exosome is like the stinky cell, the toxic stinky cell. And then these exosomes, if you look at like morphogenic fields, what we call like blueprints, like the intelligence of life, how it organizes us into this or this, any living thing, how it organizes itself. It's called the morphogenic field. And so whatever this morphogenic field for the virus is, has a certain way it wants to operate in the universe. And my theory around this is that bacterias, funguses, viruses all have a certain level of consciousness. And every conscious being wants to live and perpetuate itself. And what if their consciousness gets implanted into our cells, because that's what viruses are. And what if this is a parasitic form of consciousness that's getting inside our cells, which is in turn getting inside of our own consciousness? And I had a no shit moment 22 years ago, and I was talking to Elsa Echeverry, acupuncturist, and I was talking to her about my sweet cravings, and she very matter of factly said, "Oh, that's just the yeasty beasties." I was mortified. I was like, "What did you just say?" She said, "Oh, it's the yeast demanding to be fed." I go, "Those aren't my cravings?" She says, "Oh no, they're not your cravings at all. They're just tricking you into thinking you're craving." I was absolutely mortified. I was that out of control. Like, I can't even control my own cravings. There's some bug down there that it wants to be fed. So remember when I ate and that sound, I would know, like, oh God, I just fed the beast again. Oh no. I could never escape. Like I said, like the path of purity for me, it kept shrinking, And now my yellow brick road's like this, I had a drink the other night, mezcal, and I was like, oh, I don't feel so good. 2 days of price paying for one drink, like, damn, can I just be ignorant for one day? No, God, no, not anymore. So I'm going to get off because I'm going into my non-professional mode. Any other questions?
Actually, I do want to ask.
Yes.
Is it similar, the little, I don't know, aliens down below with the mucus tract and the communication method? Today, discovered some salmon in the refrigerator that had been, it was a week past expiration, but it was completely sealed from Trader Joe's. And I thought, well, let's just open it and see. It smelled a little funny, but not very much. Nothing bad looking. So I just wiped on the top and washed off the top and, just use all your senses, figure out what's going on here.
Yeah.
Finally I thought, okay, it's okay. I'm going to taste it. Let's see. And David, my son, was with me, and he said, okay, I'll taste it too. And we both said, that's not bad. Actually, seems like it's okay. Kind of washed off the top. All right, maybe that's it. And honestly, within 30 seconds of saying it, I felt something right here. And I know that feeling. I've had it many other times where it was like, oh, nope, I'm not going to eat that. But it was so fast, really. Do you think it's that same mucus being that like it was connected all the way down? Because I mean, it was the tiniest taste.
Well, there's a very strange intelligence in the body, and I don't want to digress, but I want to digress on another topic to seal this up with you. But yeah, what pops in is funguses, they generate hyphae, right? So there's like a central octopus, and then they have tentacles that go out into the body. And these tentacles, you can have the mother can be in your gut, but the tentacles can go all the way up into the brain. They eat their way through tissue quite easily. That was the whole nagalase vitamin D thing was supposed to halt that. And that was the whole secret of fungus and cancer, the fungus-cancer connection. You could ask Carl about that at some point, the nagalase that was supposed to like stop. Nagalase, nagalase. It was a vitamin D derivative. That was a whole conspiracy around the pharmaceutical industry went nuts to stop it. It was some crazy vitamin D derivative. It's a really fascinating story because I don't agree with the whole vitamin D. I think there's a conspiracy around that too, but that's a whole other topic of conspiracies. So I think that there's a knowing, and there are beings that are both beneficent and not, that live within us. And we want to try to avoid feeding the one. Just like in our consciousness, we don't want to spend too much time in negativity. If you spend too much time with the black wolf, you become the black wolf, right? You spend more time with the white wolf, and that. I love Gay and Katie Hendricks' ratio. 4 compliments for every criticism in a relationship. She says that if your relationship doesn't have that ratio, it's sour. 4 appreciations for every criticism.
Wow.
Yeah. Was that kind of?
Oh, yeah.
That's enough of an answer. I just think that validation right there is I was telling your son today, we have a brain here that's like a robot. It just discerns and it doesn't feel. Then we have a brain here that's kind of emotionally based, and it's kind of stupid though because it wants to give away everything. So this guy has to kind of control this guy. Otherwise, this guy gives everything away. My teacher calls it a stupid saint. You're a stupid saint. There's another one martyr that died. There's this. It's a little imbalance here. And then there's a gut one. And that's the existential part. It's like that just knows, and that's. Remember we were talking. Some of you didn't get this, but there's a theory running that I've introduced to the universe, and her husband knows about it, and a few other European doctors. Is that I just love this thought process of that. What if the bugs living in our body have their own desires? They're living out their lives through us, and that we reincarnate as souls through these bodies because of them and their desires.
Oh, wow.
Whoa.
That hits your ego right where it counts.
There are a bunch of doctors in Europe that were thinking about this the same time I was in the late 90s and early 2000s. I was like, well, there's 100th monkey thing. I was like, wow. Because my teacher said, oh, it's just the yeasty beasties creating through you. Well, there's only one cranial nerve that crosses the barrier between the brain and the gut. And it's the vagus nerve. And that's the superhighway between the gut and the brain. So they can, in fact, physiologically control on the afferent, where the nerve is going up into the brain. They can go, and get a little backdoor little signal in there, which is probably going on with the government, all kinds of stuff that we don't know, these little backdoor signals, right? Going, hey, give me a watermelon. And the worst night of my life when I actually landed on this, when I was a vegan, because I could never get enough food, I had a box of cereal, a small, like, was Trix or something. I had 2 large oatmeal raisin cookies, about that big. I had a pint of Ben & Jerry's, huge thing of milk. There might have been something else on this night. And I was sick for 2 days after that. And I knew that I was an alcoholic with sugar. It was the height of my macrobiotic studies. I was in New England doing my vegan thing and thinking I was pretty hot doo-doo and realizing I wasn't. That I had a lot of trauma and wounds that were unacknowledged. Like, well, I got some work to do here. And there are humbling moments, but I better answer your question. You want the official, want this off the record or on the record? You don't care? Great. Okay, let's get your question.
So it was interesting when you were talking about your relationship with plants, like your planning. And years ago, the shamanic group, what we did, we would pick certain plants together, then we'd lay down and one teacher would drum, and we would drum to the spirit of the plant, called spirit plant medicine. And it was amazing because so many of us picked out the same characteristics, you know, whether it was hot or cold, or what it did for the psyche, what it did for the spirit, where it would heal the body, you know, cardiac or lungs or mind. And so we found drumming and to the plant was just an amazing, you know, doing a little ritual before and so on.
Right.
To really understand the herb. And I was curious how you first had your communion, where you could understand the plants, you would really communicate with them.
Thanks. So let me repeat the question because I don't know if the people here they're still watching this. So if anybody is
yeah.
watching this on the recording, there's nobody watching now. But so we had a question about you know, the different ways people commune with plants, and then this lovely metaphor of laying down with them and drumming, and the commonality of people's experiences with various plants, because there was definitely a spirit there, and maybe to you and I, it's obvious because you can feel it. And then it's just what I call there's subtle sciences. And so the question is how it came to me was there was definitely one of those. I have a really slow kind of, it's a Taurus consciousness. Everything happens slow usually, but I have these cathartic moments like the mushroom one where the plant jumped into me. It was definitely a moment that aroused my curiosity. I had a number of those from age 21 to 37. Those 16 years were, there was like 1,000 of these moments where I was like left scratching my head going, I do not know what happened. I cannot explain that. It goes against every law of the universe I know is true, but I better go investigate. And so I was just continually drawn back to it. I had a number of mushroom experiences, and another one in Costa Rica with like wild picked off of cow dung, like from cows right up the way. At Freddy's, and wow, and I was in 3 places at once. When I look back on it, I don't know whether I was in the ocean or I was laying down on the bed or I was playing like a child behind the hut I was in. There's no way I can work that out. Very odd. So there's just a sense of, I think that if we're listening, life comes to us, and I was available enough to listen and act on it. But there wasn't any other, I mean, nothing's really popping in like a dramatic story or specifics. It was sort of a long, gradual process of just breaking down resistance to what I actually already knew as a child. I used to read the J.R. Tolkien stuff, and if anybody knows Elric of Melniboné by Michael Moorcock. There was some great fantasy novel writers, and part of me knew that there was magic to the world. You know, there's a subtle sciences, and that's what many of us know, these subtle sciences. You know, like Chinese medicine is definitely a subtle science. Communing with plants is a subtle science, but it's available to all of us. That's the empowering part. Is there's nothing talented or magical or anything about any of this. It's just, it's there. It's always and already there. Remember that? Yeah. So it's just a matter of where do you want your attention going, and there are tools to do that. And especially plants are very helpful. That's why I'm an herbalist, because I've got 200 different consciousnesses in that room over there, at least. You know, and the word in alcohol is, another metaphor for alcohol is spirits. Well, it's rather apt metaphor, because I believe the spirit of anything is in the water. So that's why I'm an herbalist. I focus on tinctures, alcohol-based tinctures, because I'm capturing the spirit of the plant, capturing it in the vodka. And for the most part, that's true, as long as I'm humble. Oh, I'll tell you one plant experience. Okay, let's get off the record for that, though. You don't need to hear that. Thank you, folks. Community dinner on Friday the 13th, which wasn't so bad after all. Nothing bad happened here. We're all good. Signing out.